Welcome. My name is Reverend Dr. Bridget A. Black, and I'm your moderator for this afternoon. Please keep your microphone on mute. We ask that you share your questions in the question and answer. Dr. James Thompson will inform us about the Moderna, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, and AstraZeneca vaccines for about 15 minutes, and then we will have a question and answer period. We will start with the questions we received earlier, and then we will move to the questions and that you are currently writing in the question and answer. Reverend Carl Terry will introduce our immunologist and allergist, Dr. James Thompson. We ask that you please donate to www.healthylivingwithavision.org. Healthy Living with a Vision is a foundation which strives for a world where there are no healthcare disparities. The mission is to get healthcare and health information to underserved communities. Reverend Carl Terry.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, we would like to thank you for coming. I would like to introduce to you some and to present to others, Dr. James A. Thompson, our allergy specialist and immunologist. We thank him for coming. God bless you. And I believe he will introduce himself in such a manner that all of us will be pleased. Thank you, sir. You are welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Good evening, everyone. I hang out in the south suburbs of Chicago and work out of two offices. One office is in Orland Park, and the other one is in Lincoln Park. And I've been in practice for 30 years. I see all ages, mostly cover asthma and allergy problems. But since the pandemic, my immunology background and expertise has been challenged. So I'm trying to meet the challenge and spread as much information about these vaccines and COVID-19 as I can. So bear with me for a minute. We'll try to get my first slide up here. Let's see if that's going to advance. Nope, okay. We'll try this one more time.
From beginning.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get the bar out of the way here. Let's see, we'll get this. Okay. All right, let's see if it, now it's gonna advance, okay. All right, so that's the first slide. And I think everybody's familiar with this slide. It's probably the most overused slide in the last year, but it gets the job done as far as giving you an up close and personal view of this virus that has infected so many people around this country and around the world. Those red spikes that come off of it are crucial. That's how they attach to our cells. And viruses are microscopic particles you can't see with the naked eye. In fact, you can't even see it with your usual high school or college microscope. It takes something called an electron microscope that's extremely powerful to see these viruses that are less than a micron in size. And so here you see those red spikes. They attach to certain receptors on our cells, and they also are the target for vaccines. Now the name of this virus is the SARS-CoV-2 virus, and that SARS stands for severe acute respiratory syndrome, and the CoV stands for coronavirus. And the reason why it has the two is because the first one, its cousin, came out in 2002. And so now this is this is another generation of it, but it's not exactly the same. Now, if we look at the cartoon here, we see this virus is made up of the surface with those spikes, and then it has its own little genetic code in there, and that's how it's able to reproduce and make other viruses. And the major roles of any virus is to, number one, infect cells, number two, to replicate, to multiply exponentially, and number three, to then spread to other hosts. And so how we combat this is by trying to block one of those steps. And I'll go more into that more. This cartoon just shows you how this virus works on us. It gets into our cells by that ACE2 receptor, that stands for angiotensin converting enzyme. It gets in the cells and then it hijacks the machinery in our cells. There's some structures, protein structures called ribosomes that are normal. We all have ribosomes. We all have messenger RNA, but this RNA containing virus, which stands for ribonucleic acid, this genetic code ends up taking over many of those ribosomes in our cells in order to make more viruses, and then they burst out of the cells to spread to other cells. And so when this happens, a lot of tissues are affected. The lungs, which are the most talked about, there's a severe syndrome called ARDS, which has a high fatality rate. Many people die when they have it. It's called acute respiratory distress syndrome, where there's so much inflammation in the lungs that it just fills the lung with fluid, and the way our body tries to ward it off ends up causing more inflammation in the lung. When it happens in the kidney, you can have kidney failure. In the heart, you can have heart failure or irritated heart, where you have rhythm disturbances called arrhythmias. When it happens in the liver may fail to detoxify like it should, or create enzymes for maintenance like it should. So you can have liver failure. When that happens in the pancreas, you can have diabetes. There are a number of people that go into the hospital with COVID and they have cough and they have fever, and they don't have diabetes, but when they come out, they do. And then if it attacks the brain, you can have something called encephalitis, where there's confusion and dementia. When it happens in the intestinal tract, you can have abdominal pain and diarrhea. So this is a multi-purpose virus that, unlike many other viruses we're used to, it can attack multiple areas of the body. And so vaccines are made to stop the spread of viruses, to reduce the infection and reduce the mortality, the death from it, as well as stop the spread. And for 200 years, vaccines have been made, going all the way back to smallpox in the late 1700s. And so the constructs, the platforms they used before were they'd use a weakened virus, like the flu virus that used to be a nasal spray. That was a weakened virus vaccine that could be used. And the inactivated viruses are ones that are killed. That's the common flu shot, where you can't get the flu because it's a killed virus, but you can spur an immune response, or you get pieces of either a bacteria or a virus to stimulate our immune system. Like tetanus is where they take the protein and try to stimulate an immunity. And then over to the right side, we see this is a new platform. These RNA vaccines don't contain any part of the virus structure. It's just their genetic code, and that goes into the cell, and then it uses, just like the actual virus does, the machinery of our cell to not make virus, but just to make spike protein. And spike protein, remember, is that target our immune system really needs to have ready in order to fight off a subsequent infection. Now, in the olden days, tens of thousands of chickens used to be collected, and hundreds of thousands of eggs, in order to use the eggs to make more vaccine. So that took a lot of time. It took weeks to months. And now when we're dealing with strips of messenger RNA, you're talking about something being toned down to days to weeks. So quite a lot of change in a little over 60 years. The typical lab used to look like that back in the 50s. What's real noticeable there is that there are no people of color in this lab. And that was probably like many labs across the nation. But if we go into labs today, we see quite a representation of people doing research. And that's the case with this virus and vaccines. I think it's epitomized here by Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett, who was at the NIH and is the lead scientist who early on had a vision, 6 years ago, in fact, that this might happen. So she studied SARS-1, and then she studied MERS, the Middle Eastern respiratory virus. And she thought, wow, if this got much worse, someone's going to really need to have some expertise on this. And so they called her number early last year when they found that SARS-2 was on the scene. And over to the right, we see, listening attentively, Dr. Anthony Fauci. And so, as I mentioned, the first coronavirus came in 2002. It was very contagious, but not as deadly, not as deadly as the MERS, which came out in 2012. But now we have kind of a combined effect with SARS-2, where it's not only very contagious, but also deadly. And so we have the birth of the messenger RNA platforms, and many people think all of this technology and information came about in 1 year, and they think, oh, this just happened too fast. But really, you have to go back 20 years when they started studying messenger RNA, and this was the brainstorm of a lady by the name of Caitlin Carrico, who was from Hungary, who came up with the idea of using messenger RNA as a therapeutic. But her research kind of got stalled when she immigrated to the United States, and many of the professors really overlooked her work, and she couldn't get funding. And this wasn't until about 7 or 8 years ago when some professors at Harvard said, wait, this messenger RNA platform might really be helpful. And so they took it up, and actually these doctors ended up making a company that we now know as Moderna, which stands for Modified RNA. And so messenger RNA vaccines, we know the two that are out here now. There's the biotech and the Moderna here on the left, the Pfizer BioNTech on the right. They both have the same mechanism. There's some differences in them. The Pfizer BioNTech, you get a shot on day 1, and then 17 to 21 days later, 3 weeks for the most part. And then for the Moderna, it's 28 days later, so 1 month later. They both use the same kind of mechanism of getting into the cell. These are just a strip of messenger RNA, not the whole virus, covered in what's look like a little bubble of fat there that gets into the cell and then has the cell machinery make that spike protein, which you can see there. Then that spike protein is on the surface to present to the immune system. And then the immune system is able to ramp up antibodies so that if we get infected with it, we'll be ready and they can deal with it. And so when we go past these two platforms, we have 2 more vaccines on the horizon. I'm not sure which one's going to come out first, maybe the Johnson & Johnson one. We were already aware of the AstraZeneca, also called Oxford vaccine. They both have the same platforms in terms of using not just messenger RNA, not just using genetic code. They use an actual virus vector, one that typically causes the common cold, called adenovirus. It's just that the difference here is the Oxford or AstraZeneca vaccine uses a chimpanzee adenovirus, and the Johnson & Johnson uses a human adenovirus. Now, why use a chimpanzee? Well, the humans are not used to having colds that chimpanzees get, so there may be less of a chance that we'd have antibodies already to that common cold virus. And whereas the Johnson & Johnson felt, well, we can still take this experimental human adenovirus and use it. And so how do you use these viruses to make vaccines? Well, you take the genetic material in them and you carve it out. So now it's just the shell of a virus, and you put in your own instructions to make spike protein. That's what all these platforms and various viruses that are coming out are targeting, that spike protein you saw on the first slide. So these adenoviruses, both the Johnson & Johnson vaccine and the AstraZeneca, don't have any genetic material to make whole viruses, only to make spike protein. But the difference between them and the messenger RNA platforms, the BioNTech and the Pfizer BioNTech, I'm sorry, and the Moderna, are that a vector is used here, a virus vector that attaches to the cell. And instead of just going in the outside of the cell, the cytoplasm, this contains DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, that must go into the nucleus of the cell in order to then be transcribed to messenger RNA and make the spike protein, which you can see off to the right there. So much like the messenger RNAs, once it's made the messenger RNA from the nucleus of the cell. Now, the bioengineers say that even though it's DNA and it goes into the nucleus, it does not go into the chromosomes or the DNA of the host cell. It does not get into our DNA. It stays outside and uses the machinery to be transcribed to messenger RNA, which then makes spike protein. So here you can see side by side the 2 different strategies here. There's 2 different mechanisms. In neither one of these situations is a whole virus made. That's an important point here. You cannot get COVID-19 from any of these vaccines because they can't make it. They're not engineered to make the virus, only the spike protein. And so now if you get infected, whether you have any of these vaccines, now you're ready if it's been 2 or more weeks since your second injection of the first two, or with the Johnson & Johnson, apparently it'll just take one injection. And so now if you're infected, they get swarmed by these antibodies before they can attach to cells. Now, if there's enough of these, what they call neutralizing antibodies around, that means you cannot get infected or pass on the infection. But we don't know yet. We know it has a 95% chance, the first two, the vaccines that are available, of making you not, of keeping you from getting real sick or dying. But we don't know if there's enough of these neutralizing antibodies to render you non-infectious and therefore not be able to pass it on. I included this slide because it just showed that these were pretty well constructed studies. The Pfizer study, the study, Pfizer-BioNTech study, and the Moderna study. They included a significant number of blacks, upwards of about 10%. And I thought that was very good. Different ages. They had a lot of people over 65. They had some young people too. They had people in different socioeconomic groups. So I thought these were very well constructed studies that had lots of people. We're talking in Pfizer, 40,000 people, and the Moderna study, 30,000 people. That's pretty high for new medicine coming out, therapeutic. And I just put this slide in here to show you Dr. James Hildreth, who's the president of Meharry Medical College. He sits on the board, the advisory board, that advises the FDA about whether vaccines should go forward or not. And he did vote that the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine go forward with their emergency use authorization. So we do have people of color at various strategic points along the way of these vaccines. And here's someone else, a Dr. Ovita Fuller, who's a virologist in Michigan, very well published, and she sits on the advisory board also. I consider these people like hidden figures. I didn't know about them until the pandemic came. And then here's a young doctor from New Jersey whose father died in April from COVID-19, and really motivated her to spend time in public health promoting these vaccines. In fact, she volunteered early on for the Moderna trial, and she's been, I'm not sure if she got the actual vaccine or not, but she felt committed to making sure that people knew about it. And she spends many of her hours each day reviewing this with people. So we're rounding up now. I always like to include this slide because they talk about herd immunity all the time. And to the right, you can see when you don't have enough people vaccinated in a community, that means you have more susceptible people, more people that can get infected. The red are people that carry the infection. The blue are people that have been vaccinated. The ones that are in the dark, the empty color ones, are people that are vulnerable. They haven't had infection. They haven't had vaccination. The ones with the red in their chest are the ones that have been infected by people that do have the infection. So you can see it can spread through a community if they're not well vaccinated, if they haven't been vaccinated, or if there aren't many of them that have been infected. And most communities do not have a large percentage of people that are already been infected and have antibodies. So if you look over here to the left with herd immunity, now you can see the infection can't travel to these people that are in the clear here, that are vulnerable, that are at risk. They may be young people that can't get the vaccine. They may be people that are really too frail to get the vaccine, or people that just don't want to. And so if you have a lot of those people in the community, then that you're going to be more on the right side of the screen versus on the left. So herd immunity is important. It's not just a personal decision when you decide to get a vaccine. It's a community decision. It's a world-related decision. So the bottom line here, currently available vaccines will not and cannot cause COVID-19. If there's anything you take away these points. Secondly, messenger RNA research goes back more than 20 years. It didn't just all come up in 1 year. The SARS research goes back almost 20 years also. The first SARS was in 2002. And advances in technology and science and manufacturing vaccines and telecommunications have all led to how the scientists were able to rapidly produce these vaccines. They didn't cut corners in safety. FDA said you had to have certain safety criteria, and they abided by them. But they were able to get things going because of advances in technology and other areas of science. And lastly, people of color are well represented throughout this process for research and administration of these vaccines. And it's ironic that we are also the subgroup that are most vulnerable, yet we have reasons to be hesitant at times with the experiences we've had with the health provider community and going back several years with experimentation. So I think there are some hurdles we certainly need to get over for that. All right, so that completes my slide collection. So we are ready to take on some questions. So I'm going to stop the screen share here.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson, for that wonderful presentation. You answered some of the questions that I had, so that's good. Question number one, if you are a kidney donor, is it safe to receive a vaccine?
Okay. If you
So you
are
only have one kidney now.
all right, if you're a kidney donor, I'm pretty certain that your doctor would say it is safe and would suggest that you get it, unless there are some other things we're unaware of going on. There are some situations where you shouldn't get it, like if you're allergic to a component of the vaccine, or if you've had the first vaccine and you've had a reaction. But assuming that's not the case, and I think it's always good to still talk with your doctor, but generally speaking, that's not a reason not to get it. I would think to preserve the health of that one kidney you have, knowing what this virus can do to kidneys. If I was your internist, and I have a background in internal medicine, I'm board certified in internal medicine, I would say you should get that shot soon as your number is up.
If you are a kidney recipient, is it safe to receive a vaccine?
The answer there, generally speaking, again, is yes. The vaccine does not contain a live virus. We have concerns if you were going to get something that required something live, knowing that people that receive kidneys and other grafts have to be on immunosuppressive drugs, we'd have some concerns that live virus might spread and cause some serious problems. But this doesn't represent a live virus. This is material that is not alive. And so that's a reason to not be concerned about that. Now, you always want to, again, talk with your healthcare provider. They may have other reasons to have you wait. And so that's always something to do. Don't just go and get it done. But generally speaking, no. There is more of a concern that you may not have quite the immune response, because if you are a recipient of a graft, you usually are maintaining some immunosuppressive medications. And if you're suppressing your immune system, you may suppress the immunity to this vaccine. So you may not be as confident that you're going to get that 95% from the Pfizer, BioNTech, or from the Moderna if you're on immune suppressive medications. So that's something you need to be aware of.
Next question. I heard that an older resident was given the vaccine and it resulted in Bell's palsy. What causes this outcome? And is this outcome reversible? And if so, how long does it take?
Okay. Bell's palsy is something that's been around for a long time. It's where the facial nerve gets inflamed, and the facial nerve feeds into some of the muscle structures in the face, as well as the tear glands and the salivary glands, the glands that make saliva. And so what the classic situation is, a person has drooping of one side of their face. And so they call that Bell's palsy. And that is generally self-limited, meaning that it goes away on its own. It may be weeks. It sometimes may be months, as much as 6 months. I know it's hard to imagine 6 months of your face drooping, but that's the reality of it. About 30 to 35 per 100,000 people in this country each year have Bell's palsy. They're not sure exactly what causes. They think viruses might have something to do with it. The herpetic virus has been implicated sometimes, herpes 1. That's the one that can cause cold sores, and even some of the other family members of that. They're really not sure what causes it, but it is 90+% of the time something that is goes away on its own, and it has not been shown to be associated with these vaccines. When you look at what's expected in a population of people that have had Bell's palsy that have gotten these injections, it is not increased over what you would expect in a group of people in the population. So there's no clear connection with these vaccines at this time for Bell's palsy.
Has the 15-minute observation of vaccine recipients proven to be helpful in deciding if the vaccine will cause unforeseen detrimental effects?
Yes, and the specific effects we're concerned about is an allergic reaction. And so most severe allergic reactions have some emergence of symptoms within the first 10 to 15 minutes. So that's where that came from. Now, they can be delayed. Sometimes they can be delayed and occur after that, but generally, that's what we see. There have been about 70 reported cases as of a few days ago when I checked that out. About 70 reported cases of severe allergic reactions. There have been no fatalities I'm aware of to this point. There have been about 23 of them that were enough to keep people, be observed in the emergency room or hospital. They've been more common in women than in men. And if we know someone has a history of being allergic to multiple medicines or to drugs or to other vaccines, then we do recommend they wait longer, 30 minutes. Sometimes there are a couple of patients I follow as an allergist. I said, I want you hanging around for 45 minutes wherever you get the shot, and make sure that you have an EpiPen with you or that there's a source of epinephrine. So we don't automatically tell patients that they can't get the shot if they have a history of drug allergies, unless it's to the first one of these vaccines. But 15 minutes for most people is adequate.
Why are there 2 doses for the shot? And why is the second dose given weeks later? And what is the percentage of immunology from the first shot to the second shot?
Well, it's given in 2 shots because that's what they found to be most effective. When they tracked people after 1 shot in the Pfizer study, and I believe also it goes for the Moderna study, they found that there was only about a 50% efficacy, 50% success rate with protecting those patients. So when they got that booster, that second shot, in the case of Pfizer BioNTech, 3 weeks, in the case of Moderna, 4 weeks, that's when they were able to get that 95, 94, 95% effectiveness. So that's why it has to be in 2 shots, because you want to have as maximum response as you can, and you want to have a long lasting response. So there's some inference there that you'll have a more sustained response to getting that second shot, that booster shot. So I think I covered also the third point, the percentage that, you have about a 50, somewhere around 50% of protection with just the 1 shot. So it is recommended that you get both. There's some studies that when they track people further out, like a month after the first shot, that 50% goes up to 70%. I think they showed that in some Moderna patients. So you might get a little bit more run out of it with just 1 shot, but the idea, it was studied as 2 shots, which gave you the 90+%. So that's what's recommended.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Has the FDA finally approved the shot? And we know that it was provided emergency approval, but that isn't the same thing as having official approval. And is there a difference between having emergency approval and official stamp of approval? And what are the regulations or rules that say that the FDA can do an emergency approval?
Yeah. Well, I don't know all the different criteria for the FDA to approve it. I can say that it's not approved currently. It is just under early use authorization. And they're compelled to have that dynamic, to have that provision, because to be approved, that means they comb through for weeks, sometimes months, sometimes more than months, all the safety data and all the benefits data to really make sure all the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted. But just think about it. If they did that, then there'd be no vaccines out there right now. And there probably would be millions of more people dying. So they have this avenue called emergency use authorization. So they can kind of streamline and just make sure the data looks safe enough, that it looks effective enough with the preliminary kind of delving into the material that they do. And then they continue to study it afterwards, because that's called phase 4, when it's being studied after it's being allowed to be used. And of course, they can always rescind it if it seems like something's bad happening, but they don't want people dying while they're combing through all this data. So it's important to have that.
Should a person with pulmonary hypertension take the vaccination?
I really don't know that there would be any contraindication, meaning any warning just because of the pulmonary hypertension. So again, this is going to always revert back to talking with your health care provider. Don't make it, oh, Dr. Thompson said I could take it and go get it. So always check with your health provider. But to my knowledge, there is really no medical condition, including pulmonary hypertension, that
Okay.
would give you pause.
Moderna is the main provider for the vaccine, but has not been able to get vaccines approved. I believe it was said this was their first to be approved. Is this true? If
Yeah.
so, why should
Oh,
we trust this vaccine,
okay.
especially being their first one approved?
Some of that is true. Moderna's been around for maybe 8 or 9 years, and I in the preceding presentation with the slides, I mentioned that there are these Harvard professors that looked at that messenger RNA research and decided to take it to another level that the founding doctor, Dr. Carrico, had left off where she'd left off. And so that's how Moderna came about. It's, again, it stands for modified RNA, and they started out using it for cancer research. And so there were cancer trials, and they were making headway, but nothing had been approved yet. They were also using it in certain conditions for inflammatory conditions in other areas. So that's why messenger RNA platform has been around. But they didn't. There were two things. One, that was before the pandemic. The pandemic made them kind of an aha moment. We could use this platform and generate, spike protein. And then secondly, it provided the impetus, the funding, the necessity to go forward with this strategy, with this technology. And the reason why I feel comfortable is two completely different companies ended up coming to the same conclusion and using the same platform and showing the same safety data, that there were no adverse effects after 2 months. So here you had BioNTech, which is in Mainz, Germany, where they were beforehand dealing with some other kind of inflammatory conditions before this came up. And then they hooked up with Pfizer, a 170-year-old pharmaceutical company, because they can scale up and market. And they ended up hiring Dr. Caitlin Carrico. So she's a part of their lab. And then you had Moderna, who I showed the slide on. We had Kizmizia Corbett, Dr. Corbett, who years ago started this process in terms of studying these viruses and worked with Moderna. And you can find her in YouTube. If you're really hesitant because of the technology, she breaks it down. This sister knows her stuff, and she's been studying it for a long time. She was in Duke. She has a PhD. She's very outspoken, and she got a lot of majority people listening to what she's saying.
Man. If you have a scheduled surgery, should you wait to get the vaccine after the surgery or before the surgery?
It really depends on, to me, when it's scheduled. If the scheduled surgery is, this week, you probably should wait. If it's a month off, then, if you're able to get the Pfizer, then, I would say, why not? But again, it sounds like a broken record. Talk with your surgeon. Ask your surgeon, okay, my surgery is scheduled on this date. Should I wait to get the vaccine, or is it okay? Because your surgeon may have an opinion about it.
Is this COVID vaccine detrimental to our RNA or our DNA? And you talked about that some in your presentation.
Yeah, no, it doesn't threaten either our DNA or our RNA. These two vaccines that are currently available, the Moderna and the Pfizer BioNTech, are messenger RNA platforms. They don't go into the nucleus. That's where our DNA is. So that's one important point. It does not go anywhere near our DNA. Now, how long does it hang around? Well, messenger RNA, it turns out, doesn't hang around that long. The biochemistry of it and how messenger RNA works, once it's read a few times, there are enzymes in the cytoplasm of the cell, that's outside the nucleus, that chews up that messenger RNA. So it can't hang around. What's the lifespan of messenger RNA? Anywhere from a few hours to a couple of days. So it's limited. It's not going to hang around, for weeks and months, doing its thing.
What is the status of improved therapeutics for sick people?
Well, that's not as exciting as it is for these vaccines. They're just, uh, the monoclonal antibodies sound good. I mean, if you catch it early, they found that the monoclonal antibodies are Y-shaped proteins, and that's what we want your immune system to ramp up when you get vaccinated. But now they've been able to, there are ways they've used this in other ways, like collecting antibodies from the serum of people that have been infected. And those are called, that's called convalescent serum. That means you've got the infection, you didn't die from it, but you're able to donate blood because you make antibodies now. That has not been very promising, and there are reasons that get kind of technical in explaining that, but not very promising using a collection of somebody else's serum. And then there's constructed monoclonal antibodies. That is very promising, but not as accessible as we like in terms of it being there when you need it. It's time honored. You need to get it in the second week after you've tested positive, but it can and does tend to save lives and keep people from getting worse. It's what the president had a cocktail of. It's what many of these some of these other politicians have had. I'm kind of disturbed that it isn't quite as accessible in the community as it is, in some of these other areas. And that's one reason why we have this foundation, so we can see what we could do about things like that.
Is that the BAM infusion that they're calling? It's called a BAM infusion?
I think I've heard it, and that just stands for the monoclonal. They have really weird, sophisticated names, and so they shorten them up. And I think that's one of them.
Let me testify about that.
Mm-hmm.
I had a gentleman call me on Monday that he had the COVID diagnosis. When this gentleman calls me, he always uses my entire name, Reverend Dr. Bridget A. Black. He did not have the breath to say my entire name. And so I told him to hang up the phone and I will text you. He told me he was going to get BAM the next day. He called and testified today on the phone after service. And this young man sounded like he was healthy. He said he was out cleaning the snow off his car. So I don't know if BAM and Jesus did it all.
I always think that Jesus has something to do with it. But yeah, BAM is short. I just looked it up while you were talking. It's short for bamlanivimab. See, I can't even pronounce it. Bamlanivimab, but it's a monoclonal antibody. That means it's an antibody that was bioengineered, and it hones right to the spike protein. They can engineer now antibodies that are like sharpshooters, because when you give steroids, which they do give for people that have very serious and severe illness, they get steroids to shut down all the inflammatory mechanisms best you can. And steroids have saved lives. But if you catch it before you're in the red zone and so sick, like even though he sounded really sick, he wasn't in that red zone, intensive care on a ventilator. Yeah. And so they got to him before, and they gave him that BAM.
BAM.
Yeah, they gave him that BAM, and that was able to go right to those spike proteins and neutralize those viruses. And so there's a number. There's about 2 or 3 companies out that have those kinds of platforms for treating SARS-CoV-2. And so I like I said, I wish that was available for more people, because so many people are coming in these hospitals to me that could use BAM, but it's not always there.
If you have a scheduled shingles vaccine, should you get the COVID-19 vaccine at the same time?
No, you shouldn't. You really shouldn't get any vaccine with with the COVID vaccine at the same time. The recommendation is that there be at least 2 weeks separation. That includes the flu shot. You should not get the flu shot. 2 weeks, yeah. You should not get the flu shot within 2 weeks of the COVID, and vice versa.
Due to the history of the medical field and the mistreatment of people of color, there are many concerns that this immunization may not have been tested on enough people of color to deem whether it's harmful or not. Tell us more about it. You said something about it in your slides. Tell us some more.
Well, in looking at both studies, there was representation of about 10%, and we make up, about 13%, 14% of the country. So it didn't eclipse the makeup of people of Black people in this country. But I'll tell you, relative to other studies that I have reviewed before medicines have come on the market, this was pretty good because, it's hard to have it both ways. We also don't tend to volunteer for studies. I mean, we're so skeptical that we don't trust being study clients. So then we say, well, there aren't enough Blacks in the study, so I think we do need to participate in more studies like that young lady I had a slide of, Dr. Chris Parnell, so that they can see before these things are approved how they work in Black people. And once we do that, then we can go a little further and be comfortable. But I felt comfortable with these particular studies because they went above and beyond to try to get some Blacks involved with these studies. And I am so proud and thankful that these Black people that were in the study volunteered.
All right. Bill Gates and Dr. Fauci's shady past actions make many defenses go up when it comes to this current pandemic situation. Are there any campaigns encouraging large amounts of white people to take the vaccine?
Yes, I mean, they're campaigning for everyone to take the vaccine because that's how you get herd immunity. So it doesn't really, this virus has no prejudice. And the majority have found that out now. If you remember early on, remember New York, Louisiana, Detroit, people, now it's in these rural areas. I mean, one of the major hotspots now that are still on the climb is Missouri. And so, now people are realizing it really involves everyone, irrespective of color. And so the recommendation is that everyone that qualifies or doesn't have any disqualifying background should get the vaccine. And so, yes, they're saying now Bill Gates, I've heard all kinds of things, trying to put tracers and chips in through the vaccine. There's been no evidence for that. They trace us already with our cell phones. Everybody here on this call has cell phones. They know where we're doing, what we're doing already. So I don't really think there's any authenticity to that. Does that adequately address that?
Yes.
Okay.
Please submit your questions to the question and answer, or you can submit them to the chat.
Yes, keep them coming.
Yes.
I wonder how many people have already had the shot. All right.
Yeah, how many people have already had the shot?
I saw a hand. I saw a
raise
hand
your
got up.
hand.
I only saw one hand go up, but I don't have everybody on the screen. So I've had my two. Yeah.
Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, that's an issue, Dr. Thompson, about McLean County Health Department and getting vaccines to persons of color, which is an issue which will be dealt with on Monday. But we're gonna stay focused on vaccines today. If there are no other questions, wait a minute, I got one more. If you had COVID this past September, should you expect to have some side effects with the vaccine?
If you had it in September, October, November. No, you wouldn't expect, but sometimes because you already have a kind of a priming from your antibody response that came from the natural infection, that means that reactogenic adverse effect you can have, which are headache, fatigue, sometimes a little fever, achiness, even for some people, and they feel a little sick to their stomach. That may be a little higher, and that's kind of been my anecdotal experience. I don't know that they have any studies that show that, but they have mentioned that. But the reason why it's recommended that even if you've had it, that you get it, is because it boosts your immune system. And they've been shown that after somewhere around 3 to 6 months after your infection, there tends in some people to be a waning of that immunity. So then that parlays into the question, when do you get it if you've had the infection? You know, you should get it right away after you recover. And the answer is that you should have recovered at least it should be at least 2 weeks, no sooner than 2 weeks after you've recovered. But you can wait 90 days also. I mean, you tend to have a pretty robust immunity after it's for about 3 months. So if you wanted to wait the 3 months, you could. Now, some people feel like, I don't know if there's going to be enough vaccines around in 3 months, so I might want to get it sooner. And that's your choice. You can. But it is recommended that even if you've had COVID, serious or lightweight type of mild severity, that you still should get the vaccine.
Have you Dr. Thompson, have you taken the vaccine? And if so, which one?
Yes, I did. There was an email about a month ago. No, it's like almost 2 months ago. An email came across late night at Ingalls and Harvey, Ingalls University, Chicago, that they had some vaccine available that they were going to have to send back because they didn't have as many healthcare workers signed up coming in. You know, a lot of them signed up, but weren't coming in. And, you know, with the Pfizer one, you got 5 days. That's a big difference with the Moderna versus Pfizer. You got 30 days when you thaw out the Moderna. You have 5 days with the Pfizer. So these hospitals are under a lot of pressure to unload these vaccines into some arms. So we get a lot of, midnight calls and late emails. Come get this vaccine. We know you're not in that first category. Like me, I don't hang around the hospital a lot. I do get called in for consults, but I was going to wait for these frontline healthcare workers to get theirs first. But some of them were sluggish about coming in to get them. And so when I saw that I could go get it, I didn't want it wasted. I went right in and got it. So I got my second one. It'll be 3 weeks tomorrow that I got my second Pfizer BioNTech vaccine. But if it had been Moderna calling, I'd have gone to get the Moderna. It would not have mattered to me. I get what's up.
And that's your real color. It's not green. You're not green.
I don't think I am.
Okay.
I haven't grown any extra arms either.
So that.
And let me address something else since the questions are dying down here. Sterilizing. I want everybody to know when they say sterilizing vaccination, sterilizing impact, they do not mean becoming infertile. Okay. That's not what they mean by sterilizing in this context. We want sterilizing vaccines in this context because we want them to render us non-infectious. You know, that picture I show where they infect cells by sticking to that ACE2 receptor. Well, if we have enough antibodies to neutralize that so they cannot infect our cells throughout our bodies, that's sterilizing. That means you not only won't get infected, but also you won't communicate. You won't transmit this, pass it on to your loved ones and friends and other folks. Because if you think about it, if these aren't sterilizing vaccines, they really make us asymptomatic carriers for a while. We could end up getting it from somebody because we get careless maybe with the masking and distancing, which, by the way, we want to all still do no matter how long it's been since you had the vaccine. Don't think you become Superman or Superwoman because you got the vaccine. You still need to distance and stay away from large gatherings and wash your hands and do all these things you're supposed to do, because there's not enough evidence right now to say it's a sterilizing vaccine. So again, we're not talking about fertility. We're not talking about whether you're going to have babies, men or women. We're talking about sterilizing from the standpoint of making it so you don't get infected and therefore are able to pass on the infection to someone else, not knowing because you're in that 95% that's not going to get sick. It's not going to get fever. It's not going to feel anything from it. So very important.
Are children in the trials yet for the vaccines?
Yes, there's some ongoing trials, I think, for both now, Moderna and Pfizer, looking at ages from down to age 6, like 6 to 15, 6 to 16. Now, the Pfizer BioNTech is down to age 16 and the Moderna is down to age 18 as it is now. So if you have an 18-year-old or 16-year-old, they're not down to that grouping yet, but they are able by age to get it. And there are ongoing studies in pediatrics right now for both of those vaccines.
What's the difference between Moderna and Pfizer?
They both have messenger RNA. There's not a lot of difference. Most of the difference is, as I mentioned, the Moderna, you get your second dose 4 weeks later, 28 days, and the Pfizer 3 weeks. They have similar profiles as far as adverse effects. They have similar profiles as far as effectiveness, being 95% chance you're not going to get sick and die from the virus. Where the real differences are what we call logistics. So with the Pfizer BioNTech, you have to have one of those freezers that go down to minus 94 degrees. I don't have one of those in my office, and most of my local pharmacies don't have it. So they, and once you thaw them out, you got 5 days in the refrigerator to use them. So the logistics are different for Pfizer BioNTech in terms of being in the communities. You got to have them where they have these expensive freezers. Whereas it's not so much that cold supply chain issue with the Moderna, which can be 30 days after it's been thawed out. Now, it still needs a deep freeze when you're storing it for long periods of time. Now, they don't talk about that much, but you have 30 days once it is thawed out.
If you've had COVID once or twice, has your system built up a immunity? Do you have a defense already?
Yes, you do. The problem is we don't know how much of a defense, and there are some scientists. There's a guy named Dr. Shane Crotty out of San Diego who I look up every few weeks to see if he's published anything else or interviewed on any work he's doing. He's the one that published some really good data as far as showing that even about 8 months out, people that have had the natural infection still have some neutralizing antibodies. So that's, so that's promising that there may be some significant immunity. It's just they don't know when we say neutralizing antibodies, that means antibodies that go to that spike protein, but we still don't know whether it keeps people from getting infected and getting real sick. So that's why they still say get the vaccination. But generally speaking, the vaccines tend to be very, the infections tend to be good at rendering you immune for a significant period of time.
Is there any data that suggests there are reactions to current medications and the vaccine, or that the vaccine may heighten a condition?
Let me think. No, what I didn't mention is the two. I don't think I might have mentioned. I mentioned that no one should get the vaccine that is allergic to a component in it, and these vaccines, the ones that are currently available, don't have preservatives in it. They don't have fetal tissue in it. They don't have antibiotic traces in it. They don't have gelatin in it. These are all things that the flu vaccine has. The flu vaccine doesn't have the fetal tissue, but the flu vaccine has a little trace amount, sometimes of egg protein, so much of trace now that we still give it to people that have a history of egg allergy unless they have like egg anaphylaxis where their throat closes up and they get blood pressure problems from it. But generally speaking, these vaccines don't have any of that stuff in it, but they do have something in it. They have something called polyethylene glycol, PEG for short. That's an ingredient in Miralax. And so if you ever had Miralax for constipation and you got hives or you started having profuse vomiting and blood pressure drop, you shouldn't get either one of these vaccines. If you've had one of these vaccines and had allergy symptoms, started wheezing, started having hives, lip swell, tongue swell, then you shouldn't get that second vaccination. You just should not get it. Now, if you just had like fatigue and shortness of breath and headache, I had one patient that called me a few days ago when I was in the office. It was 9 days after her vaccination. I don't remember which one it was. She had feelings of achiness and she got a low-grade temp. And so she was asking me, should she get the second shot? And I said, absolutely. That was a reactogenic process. She didn't have hives. She didn't swell and itch. Didn't have wheezing. She just 9 days later had what's called reactogenic response, when you can get fatigue, muscle aches, pain, you have a little flu-like illness. It usually lasts no more than 1 to 3 days. And so I just told her to stay the course unless it got more severe.
They're suggesting that if you're over 65, not to take the vaccine. Why is that?
I don't know who's suggesting that.
Yeah, I don't either. I never heard that one, but you know.
Those are the people that should get it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, as you get older, your immune system tends to wane. That's why they recommend people that age get that more potent flu vaccine. They got this high potent flu vaccine you're supposed to get when you reach a certain age. And so really that's a clearly an established subgroup that should get the vaccine.
In addition to forums like this, how do we as ordinary people combat the misinformation that deters people of color from wanting to get vaccinated?
Well, don't hang out on the internet too much, and people start saying stuff.
Say that again.
I said, don't hang out on these internet sites where you see that, all kinds of information that sounds shaky, because there's a lot out there on the internet flying around, especially social media. Look at the CDC every now and then. Now, I wouldn't have said this a few weeks ago. Look at the CDC because it was different with who they were answering to, and CDC was under a lot of pressure by the outgoing regime. Now, I think people are back. The scientists are back in the seats, and I'm more trusting of what's going on there with research, and just talk to your doctors, the ones you do trust. Talk to them, and keep participating in forums like this. This is a fluid state here. I mean, what I'm telling you now, 3 weeks from now, may be a little different because this is an ongoing process. So keep having forums like this with people like me and other folks, bringing information to you, and have your questions and get them answered.
Why do people with O type blood have less symptoms with COVID-19?
Well, that's been an association, and they're not quite sure. There's some speculation scientifically there that they think may have to do with some clotting mechanisms. But what we've been telling people is to not rely on that at all. It's just not distinct enough. It's not separating enough from others. They said there's a slight decrease severity in people with type O. There's a slight increased severity with people with type A, and there's they're trying to look at that to define more what's going on. It may have to do with some proteins that are located on blood cells and with some clotting mechanisms, but not enough to make any difference in what we've been saying in terms of the importance of distancing and getting vaccinated.
All right, we're down to our last 3 questions. Can you explain the herd immunity process again?
Oh, sure.
Can people still transmit the virus after they've received it?
Well, I'll take the first one. Herd immunity is where enough people in a community of people have either been vaccinated or have had the infection, so that there are now barriers to further spread of that virus. Maybe some that are on now didn't see that last slide, or one of the last slides I had that showed a community that had herd immunity versus a community that didn't. In the community that didn't have herd immunity, there were several people in the community that had not been vaccinated, had not had infection. So that means they were susceptible. And so if you bring somebody into that community that has the infection, and remember, this is a plight that involves at least about 5 days where you don't know you have it. And just before you get symptoms is when you are the most infectious. You can pass it on. I mean, there's a blip on the chart in terms of how much virus you're shedding that goes way up just before you start having any symptoms. Not to mention, there are some people that are asymptomatic, meaning they go the whole course not having any symptoms. Their immune system works silently and they don't know it, and they're having little sniffles. They may think it's their allergies or a cold, and they're shedding virus everywhere until their immune system wins the battle. That's called asymptomatic. Now then there's pre-symptomatic, which is what the majority, that's what I started off talking about. People that in those first 5 days, they got exposed to it, they didn't know it. Now it's ramping up in them. They don't know it. They're shedding it like mad, and then they have symptoms, a few days after that. So, for those reasons, herd immunity is real important, because you wall off an infection if you have enough people vaccinated or enough people with antibodies because they've already had the infection. So if someone comes in that has the infection and they don't know they should be distancing and all that, and they're not following the guidelines and they're pushing, they're spreading these germs, these viruses, you're protected because you got vaccinated. You're protected because you've already had the infection and you have antibodies. So that's herd immunity, when the herd tends to protect those individuals that are not vaccinated. Maybe they couldn't get vaccinated. Maybe they're 12 years old, 10 years old, young. Maybe they're hard-headed and they just, I don't believe in any of this. They're going to always be those individuals. They're the anti-vaxxers that no matter what you tell them, no matter what data you give them, they think it's all false. They're not going to get vaccinated. Well, we're a Christian community, right? We protect them too because we know better. So, that's the herd immunity. Now, the other part about that, what was it, the virus? What was the other second part of that? Was whether you could transmit the virus, I think, was that it? Whether you could transmit the virus after you've been infected or vaccinated. That was the unclear part. So let me address both. When you are vaccinated, you might still transmit the virus. So that's why it's important to still mask and social distance and do all these, I like to say physical distance. We don't need social distance, we're physically distancing right now, but we could be social. But you still need to do all these things even though you're vaccinated, because remember, we still don't know whether the vaccine has success in rendering you non-infectious. We don't know if it's I hate to use the term sterilizing because somebody may have came on, they didn't hear me define sterilizing. Again, not fertile, but in terms of making it so you're not infectious. Since we don't know that for sure yet, and that data may be out in another month or two, we have to continue with these guidelines. Yes, you can get infected even if you've been vaccinated a month ago, and you can possibly pass it on. The vaccine just means you are 95% unlikely to get real sick and die from the virus. Okay. Now, suppose you've not been vaccinated, but you had the infection, say 2 months ago. Chances are you still are protected by those antibodies you have. But again, you might still get infected and not know it and shed that virus to somebody else. Now, one question we haven't yet had tonight, I know we're at the end of this hour, but nobody said anything about the variants, the mutants, these new variants that are mounting up everywhere. Nobody asked about that. But I guess we have to do that. I guess we have to address that next time.
No, there's a question about that, about the UK and the South African variant. Wait a minute. Will COVID-19 vaccine, okay, let me say this. We had said we would be done at 6. We have about 3 more questions. Can you all hold on? Are you okay, Dr. Thompson?
I'm just fine. I'm fired up.
Okay, we got about 3 more questions. Okay. Will COVID-19 vaccines be annual?
All right, we don't know. That remains to be seen. If you ask me to make a prediction, I think it's going to be either 1 to 2 years. I think it's going to probably be 1 to 2 years. It could be 2, but we won't know until we have more time with these vaccines to see how long the vaccines are going to hold up with keeping people protected. And we don't know yet whether you get whether you're rendered non-infectious from it. That plays a lot in the herd immunity part. I mean, a lot of people may not die and get real sick from it, but if we aren't rendered non-infectious, then there's still going to be a lot of passage of this virus. And so, but it's good not to overwhelm the good news is we're not going to be overwhelming the hospitals if a lot of people aren't getting sick and dying from this. There's not going to be a lot of funerals and cremations and stuff like that.
Okay. As pastors and community workers, should we call our doctors and explain our work and see if we can get the vaccine before it's opened up to everybody else? Essentially, can we get the vaccine sooner than later?
I'm not sure how to answer that one because it depends. It depends. There's a lot of different variables here. Like I'm here in Illinois, and Illinois has its guidelines, and many of you are in Indiana, and it has its guidelines. I'm not as familiar with the policies and guidelines in Indiana as I am in Illinois. And I know in Illinois, every time you look around, it seems like it's a little changed. So I don't know really the answer to that other than, if you're interested in the vaccine, make sure you signed up on whatever platforms you can. Find out, go online and look at where they're signing up. and talk with your doctor. Your doctor should have information too locally about where perhaps you can get the vaccine, and do your best to stay that course. Be your own best advocate.
Uh, will you discuss the UK and
Okay.
South Africa?
Yeah, I need to circle back to that. Yeah, so they're very well. Let's get one thing straight. Let's get the terminology straight, because you'll hear about these new strains, right? There's only one strain, and that's the SARS-CoV-2. That's the SARS-CoV-2, one strain. If another strain comes out, we got big problems, because the first strain was SARS-1, well, SARS, and then it was SARS-CoV-2. Now, MERS is in between there, Middle Eastern respiratory virus that's in that coronavirus family. But there's only one strain. So what they're really talking about are variants. And variants, realize that there have been over 4,000 mutations of this virus since it came on over a year ago. 4,000, lots of mutations. That's what this virus does. It mutates. That's how it survives. That's why it's important to get vaccinated and to do the social distancing and all the stuff we're supposed to do to wall it off and try to make it so it doesn't readily continue to mutate. But what happens here is that it's important that we understand that there's going to be mutations, but they're not all going to be bad. Some of these mutations make the virus less advantageous, make it weak. And so we don't hear about those because, people aren't going to be, there's not going to be an escalation of people getting sick and dying. But when there's a new behavior from enough mutations, like say there's 7 mutations near the spike protein, or 17, which happened with the UK virus, where there were a bunch of mutations in the spike protein. That's when it can behave differently. And that's what tells scientists, okay, we need to map this and see if this is a new thing going on, because so many more people are getting infected. In the UK, the predominant virus right now is that UK B117. That's the variant that has spread there and now is predominantly in the US. Now there was another one, it's called B1351, that's in South Africa. Now the one thing about that one is more lethal. That one is in South Africa is killing some children as well as adults, and it's also very contagious. And now, as far as I know, I was checking last night, there are 2 states that have found that one. I think South Carolina's one. I forget the second one today I saw. They're tracking and trying to really make sure that that one doesn't become predominant. That's what we need to, it's a race with these vaccines. It's a race to wall off these vaccines, because right now there's no evidence that these vaccines won't work with them. And the expectation is they will, because remember, it's not an all or none response. It's not like, okay, either it's going to work or it's not. I'm either going to live or I'm going to die. It's not like that. I mean, we've been surviving flus for a long time because we settle for 30 and 60% efficacy. So, and now we got vaccines that are 90+%. So if instead of 95, it's 80 or 70, that's still good. That's still very good. And so if enough people get vaccinated, we can still have the herd immunity effect. It can still wall off these variants. The Brazilian, there's a Brazilian one also that has emerged. And so, but the vaccines right now, it appears that they may still be able to help with these variants. Now, what can make that change and there be a variant in the future that these vaccines can't handle? If they're allowed to continue to multiply in populations that are unvaccinated, people that are not distancing and doing the thing that they should, and it continues to just multiply in individuals and be able to mutate more, it can then one day maybe mutate away from these vaccines. Now, the good news, because we don't have to think of gloom and doom, the good news is, remember this fast-paced way they were able to get this messenger RNA from study to injection. Now they don't have to reinvent the wheel. They already know exactly what to do. All they have to have is that genetic code. So yeah, like the flu shot, maybe every 2 years, we're gonna have to get boosters for something that's been mutated and that's created more problems. We're gonna have to live with SARS-CoV-2 for a while, but we may be able to get more back to normal if enough people are vaccinated and enough people do still distance and wash and do all the things I've been mentioning. And the elephant in the room I didn't talk about is if we get our health together and we had lower risk for diabetes and hypertension and obesity and kidney disease. If we stop eating that fatty food and all that fatty meat and egg and cow's milk, and we eat more whole foods and vegetables and fruits and cruciferous vegetables and things like that. I love the sound of cruciferous vegetables. You know, that's what we need to do. That's what we need. We need to make ourselves less susceptible. We are not genetically inclined to die from COVID. We're not. But
Dr. Thompson,
we are
Dr.
suffering.
Thompson,
Yes.
in our neighborhood, we call that meddling. You done gone to meddling.
We need some meddling. We need some meddling. Like,
Yes,
I
we
don't
do.
know. I don't know what we need.
Last question. What is your experience with long-termers, those who have symptoms like chronic fatigue syndrome?
I'm so glad you asked, because that's another part of, we focus so much on mortality. You know, it's been averaging 4,000 people a day dying, and we've got desensitized to that now. I mean, when I see those numbers, it was like 3,000 last I checked today. It was closing in on 3,000. I mean, I always think, okay, 3,000. They all got families. That's probably 12,000 people just grieving, and not, and their loved ones now in some hospital or something, that were in some hospital. They never even able to say goodbye. So I'll never shortchange the impact of mortality. But there's something else out there that's just right behind that, and that's morbidity, the quality of life. And some third of people that survive these things are now months away from it and still having what's called long hauler effects, where they have fatigue, or they have shortness of breath, or they have brain fog, or they have diabetes, or they have, some aches and pains that won't go away, disabling in some cases. I have people calling me that were sick in March and April, and they want excuses for work. They want to fill out disability papers. They can't function. They don't feel the same as they did before. There 20% of them are depressed, can't sleep. So this long hauler is no joke. And it's not just people that had severe disease. I'm talking about some of these people had mild disease. Not to mention the chest x-rays of some people that have this now. The surgeons are finding, and the pulmonary doctors are finding, that some of these people that even have mild disease are having irreversible changes on their chest x-ray. What they see was somebody that smoked for 20, 30 years, but they didn't smoke. Now, what's the natural history of that? I mean, that means there's a chance a lot of these people that weren't even that sick from it, that maybe just had a little cough, may another 10, 15, 20 years need oxygen because they have chronic lung disease. Not to mention those that smoke and get COVID. So it's really serious. The morbidity, the people that just get sick without dying, there's some serious long-term issues for a lot of them, and we don't know where that's going to end.
Dr. Thompson, we thank you. You gave us a wealth of information. Before we close, if Presiding Elder Tyson Parks would just say hello, and would William Bennett, the president of the African American Ministerial Alliance in Bloomington, Normal, if he would let me unmute him, he would say hello. And I think Linda Foster's still on, the president of the NAACP in Bloomington, Normal. Presiding Elder Parks, you're unmuted, you may speak.
Okay. Dr. Thompson, you have blessed our souls with sharing based on your personal experience, and I am appreciative of what you have shared with us on today. And I am grateful that we have some African Americans that are working in this field that will always be able to encourage our community to do the right thing. And I thank you for your insight and the knowledge that you have shared with us, a wealth of knowledge. So I take my hat off to you and say, God bless you, and keep up the good work, because we need individuals like you out there in this field to fight for us. Because when we look back through our history, we did not have persons of color there, but now we do. And so to God be the glory for the great things that he's done in and through you. And thank you for sharing with us on today. And we will continue in the forefront of making sure that as much as possible, we share with our community the importance of taking these vaccines, whichever one comes first. I'm in the process of trying to find out when I can get mine taken, because I'm on the bandwagon to get this done. Because the last thing I need to do is go to heaven before my time, and I'm not ready to go just yet, but I know my time is coming. So to God be the glory. God bless you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sister Linda Foster, president of the NAACP. Oh, I didn't tell you, Presiding Elder Tyson J. Parks is the presiding elder of the North District of the Illinois Annual Conference. Amen. Linda Foster, say a word.
Thank you, Dr. Black. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Thompson, for that very informative presentation. You know, we always want to hear from people who look like us. And so you do that, you feel that. And not only do you not look like us, you got the background that will encourage us to be more informative. Thank you for encouraging us. You know, knowledge is important, but it's also important that we understand who is coming from. And so it is enlightened. And you can always, thank you, because we can always learn something. And I believe that tonight we have taken some nuggets in which we can have more information about that decision making. And it is important that we as a community, especially people of color, is informed, and that we're making decisions that impact us, our families, and our community. So thank you so much, and everyone that is on this this panel.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Pastor Bennett, president of the African American Ministerial Alliance for Bloomington Normal. Would you say a word?
Okay, can you hear me,
Yes, sir.
Dr. Black? All right. First, I want to say thank you to the presiding elders on here, to Dr. Reverend Black for helping us get this together. Then want to say thank you to Dr. Thompson for an awesome presentation. The work that you've done today is tremendous in helping us have more information and to be more prepared for the decisions that we have to make. I would just hope that everyone who was listening on today feels satisfied with the wealth of information that we received, and that we not only take it in for us, but share it with people in your family. Share it with people in our community, especially those of the African American race. And then hopefully, if we'll be able to get this recording too, for those who may need to see it at another time. But I just appreciate the knowledge and the information that was given today. I will say for myself and my house that I will be getting the vaccine. So I think it's important for those who will, of the African American communities, to state that they will, to put some sense of confidence within our own community. But thanks again, Dr. Black.
You're welcome, sir. Dr. Thompson, would you like to have a closing word?
Oh, sure. Again, I appreciate being here. This is a passion I have, talking with the community. Just as you feel, I guess, a little more comfortable with me, I feel a lot more comfortable with you. So I appreciate those that are able to attend. And as already mentioned, please spread what you learned. And just remember, I think I finished up where I should have with talking about herd immunity, that this is not just a personal decision. It's a societal decision, because if we're healthier and we don't go down from this this plague, then we can be more productive, and we can pass on what we know and to other people, and not pass on necessarily this virus to other people. So I think we should all think about that.
What's up, Sarah?
All right. And I just I'll close there and say good night. Thank you.
Okay.
All right,
That
y'all need
must
to,
have been a Delta.
you must keep your mics muted in the name of Jesus. All right, please make a donation to Healthy Living with a Vision.org. It's a foundation that Dr. Thompson belongs to, and they strive for a world where there are no health care disparities. Their mission is to get health care and health information to undeserved communities. God bless you. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and stay tuned. We have more of these town halls coming. God bless. Take care.
Good night.